Hello my friends, welcome back to Nocturnity. Tonight we have some more glitch in the matrix stories that are sure to have you second-guessing reality itself. Like last time, this broadcast is brought to you by CardanApparel.com, and the link is in the description for you to check out all they have to offer. And before you leave, don't forget to help out the Nocturnity community in the algorithm by giving this video a like and a share. And if you're new, take these few seconds before the stories begin to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on all the fantastic content we have on the way for you in the future. Now, let's waste no more time and get straight into these mind-bending accounts as we drift into the realm of eternal night. I don't know what happened here, whether some sort of defect in the fabric of reality or something supernatural, but here goes nothing. When I used to work evening shifts at the mall, I would get home around 11:30, fix myself a light snack and a tea, and then watch television with my husband before he went off to bed, usually after falling asleep sitting up on the couch. He'd start snoring and I'd say, "Carl, go to bed," and he'd grumble and go off to the bedroom. On this certain night, I came home, as any other night, to see Carl sitting on the couch in his jeans and denim button-up shirt, looking like a zombie, as usual, watching TV. I said hello and went into the kitchen and put a kettle on, talking away to him in the other room about my night as I prepared the tea for him and me. And every so often I'd peek my head into the living room as I rambled on. Carl, like any other night, just kept staring at the TV while he listened. But in hindsight, I must admit there did seem to be something a little off about him that I didn't really clue into at that time. Anywho, when I had my tea and some crackers and cheese ready, I went in and joined him on the couch and asked how his day was. He didn't respond. His eyes were glazed over and locked on the television. I could tell he wasn't paying attention to it, much less me. So I was right about to say, "Carl, go to bed," when I heard our back door open. This was concerning, obviously, because it was a few minutes before midnight and nobody should have been walking into our house at that time. I looked at Carl and was so confused that he didn't seem to share my puzzlement at what was happening. I expected him to jump up and go see who the heck it was, but he just stared at the TV. So in a frightened voice, I called out, "Hello?" No answer. But I heard shuffling of some kind going on in there. Whoever it was up to something. This was frankly terrifying. There was now an intruder inside our damn house, and Carl wasn't moving a finger. I shoved him to clue him in, and he just kind of rocked for a second and stayed in position. That scared me even more. I honestly didn't know what to think. It was all too strange, scary, and overwhelming. I now heard the person in the kitchen rummaging around through our cupboards, and with Carl not doing a thing, I had to do something. So I stood up and tiptoed over to the kitchen and peeked in. There was a big man bent over looking into our refrigerator. I don't know where I found the words, but I said, "Excuse me, what the hell are you doing?" My brain pretty much shattered when the man turned around. It was Carl, but he wasn't in jeans and a denim shirt. He was in a colored white shirt with black slacks on. With a cold beer in his hand, he said, "Sorry, baby, I thought you were asleep." I was all I could really say. Carl looked at me with concern. "Are you okay?" he asked. I turned back to the couch and saw that it was empty. I said, "How'd you do that?" "Do what?" "I was just with you on the couch," I told him. His brows furrowed and he walked past me into the living room to see it empty. "Wasn't me," he said, turning back to me. "Tonight was Brian's stag party." I was so perplexed I just stood there without a word coming to mind. I did remember that was true, though. Brian's bachelor party was that night. I'd forgotten. "Who's here?" Carl asked, looking around. He went into the bedroom and then into the bathroom and then came back out, looking out through the blinds into the yard. "Who's here, Dana?" he asked me again. It was you," I stammered. "I was sitting there watching TV on the couch with you, I swear it." Now Carl's concern turned from thinking someone was there to thinking I was having a mental breakdown. "Wasn't me," he said again. I had to sit down and gather my thoughts. When I had, I explained to him the events I explained to you. How I came home, made my tea, told him about my day, sat down with him, what he was wearing, what he looked like, how he was acting, that I literally touched him, all of it. Carl was pretty concerned for my mental health for the next little while, but obviously could see that I wasn't delusional about anything else, nor had I ever been before that night. I know that what happened did happen. I didn't imagine it. I didn't have some kind of mental episode. It was what it was. It's never happened again since. I don't know if that place was haunted or what the heck it was all about, but it still freaks me out to think about. Who or what was that sitting next to me on our couch that night? I'm sure you've heard the phrase, "they're as different as night and day." It's pretty self-explanatory. Nothing could be more indicative of opposites than the nighttime and the daytime, which is what makes what happened to me not only once but twice so unexplainable. I used to live alone in a one-level house in the most boring city in the world, Casper, Wyoming. One summer morning, I woke up with the sun filling my bedroom with light through the window. You know when you feel like you could get a little more sleep, but you just can't because even when you close your eyes, the light from the sun prevents it? So you just think, forget it, and just get out of bed and start your day? Well, it was one of those mornings. I had blinds that were closed, but they weren't darkening the room by any means, so I got out of bed and opened them to let the full extent of the sun fill my room with its warm glow. As usual on a weekend morning, I then left my bedroom squinting and headed to the kitchen for some cereal. Here's where I encountered the strangest occurrence of my life. Keep in mind that I had just woken up, and my mind wasn't the sharpest it can be at that point. Anyways, I found myself walking through my living room and turning on lamps to see properly. When I got to the kitchen, I stopped myself and then spun around to face the living room window. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was dark outside. The sun hadn't even begun to rise. I looked at the microwave clock and it said 4:28, as in 4:28 in the morning. This was like an overload to me. It tripped my brain. I looked back down the hall towards my bedroom and saw the sunbeams shining out of the doorway, so I beelined it back in there and looked out the window. Sunny! I ran back out to the living room and looked out that window. Dark! These windows, I should clarify, are on the same side of the house. In fact, I went right up to the living room window and looked outside to the driveway right in front of my bedroom window to confirm that it was dark no matter where I looked. I then ran back to my room and triple-checked. It was as bright as high noon in there still. It was a small rancher, so it only took a minute to check every other window in the house, and they all showed nighttime. I was laughing out loud at this point. Finally, I opened my front door and went right out into the front yard and walked right up to my bedroom window and looked inside. The room was as dark in there as any room would be in the middle of the night. Within an hour or so, the sun started showing its face, and then the whole house was lit up, and the phenomenon came to a close. I told my parents about it that afternoon when it was a decent enough time to call them, and they thought I probably saw the sun rise at a time when it just appeared as if it was night out one window and day out the other. Whatever. Fine. Don't believe me. I mean, I wouldn't believe it either had they told me the same story. Skip ahead a few weeks and I woke up in the middle of the night to take a leak. Half asleep, I stumbled out of my room through the dark hallway and into the bathroom and began evacuation. Then it dawned on me. The bathroom window was lit right up. It was one of those bathroom windows that you can't see out of. One of the ones that use obscure glass to provide proper privacy. So as soon as I finished this seemingly endless middle-of-the-night pee, I slid open the window to see the backyard lit up like an August afternoon. It was happening again. I ran out of the bathroom and the house was pitch black dark. Every other window showed night. So I went out to the backyard, and though the bathroom window was still open, it was nighttime out there. The clock showed 2:27, as in 2:27 a.m. It was literally the middle of the night. Though back inside, when I was inside the bathroom, the window still showed a beautiful sunny day. This was way before cell phones had cameras in them. In fact, it was way before the average person could even afford to have a cell phone. So I had no camera to document what was happening to prove it to my friends and family. But as soon as the stores opened that day, I went and bought a video camera, which I could barely afford, to make sure I could film this phenomenon next time it happened. But, of course, it never did. And I've been stuck for decades trying to come across some kind of explanation for it all. No luck so far. A few nights ago, I dropped one of my earrings as I was taking them out before getting into bed. I definitely heard it hit the floor, which is hard wood in my room, and would have sworn that I also saw it bounce under my bed out of the corner of my eye. Seeing that it wasn't visible anywhere, I deduced that it must be the case, so I bent down and slid my hand back and forth under the bed for a while, but I wasn't able to find it, which was disappointing because those are my favorite earrings for sentimental reasons. But I knew it couldn't have disappeared, so I figured I'd find it the next day at some point when I had some more time to look, and then went to sleep. The next day, after homeroom, I grabbed a bag of ketchup chips out of my lunch bag and started walking down the hall while opening it. Like the klutz I am, I ripped the bag too hard and the chips basically exploded out of it all over the floor. It was embarrassing enough having everyone start laughing at me, but what made it worse was that I couldn't just walk away because my vice principal was standing right there. He rolled his eyes and said, "Clean it up, Miss Boltwood," and I had to get down on my hands and knees and do as he said. This is where my mind blew up much more extremely than my bag of chips did. There, buried under the pile of Lay's ketchups, was my lost earring. Goosebumps broke out all over my body as I picked it up and inspected it. This was impossible. It was as if it had somehow fell out of my ear the night before and found its way into a sealed bag of chips downstairs in the kitchen. And there was no mistaking it. This is a one-of-a-kind pair of earrings passed down to me from my grandmother. There's an engraving on each of them with her initials, F.A.B. for Francine Annabelle Boltwood, and each one of them has a different style of font. Confused doesn't even begin to describe where my mind was at. Neither does amazed. I just sat there on the hallway floor staring at it. And it gets even stranger. Later that evening, when I got up to my room, I reached in my jeans pocket for the earring, and it was gone. I searched every pocket on my clothes and even went downstairs to check my jacket and bag. I checked, double-checked, and triple-checked, but it was of no use. It was nowhere to be found. After such a weird sort of miracle that happened earlier, my disappointment was compounded over the loss. A little later in the night, I was taking off the earrings that I was wearing that day, and again I dropped one. I thought to myself, "I'm not losing this one," and bent down with my cell phone's torchlight on. To my shock and amazement, there were two unmissable reflections shining back at me under the bed, side by side, as if they were put there on display. I reached under and pulled them out. One was the earring I had just dropped, and the other was my grandmother's earring that I'd dropped the night before. But how? I saw the engraving on this very earring at school earlier that day. I examined it closely a few times throughout the day. There was no doubt it was this earring. And I thought the goosebumps at school were bad. I nearly shivered at this turn of events. I looked up at my nightstand to double-check the other one in the pair was still sitting there from where I put it down the night before, and yep, this was the pair, reunited, neither missing. I have no explanation for any of this. I'm as grateful as one could be for not losing the heirlooms, but more confused than I thought was possible. At this point, I guess I have to admit I have no idea what possible really is anymore. I work for a company that sells and repairs landscaping equipment. I'm a mechanic in the repairs department. My day consists of basically taking things apart and then putting them back together again. The other day I was working on a lawnmower motor when something weird happened. My mind hasn't been able to shake it since. The motor came from a company who must do painting as well because the thing was spackled in white paint. I had it up on a lift I use and I was working away when I turned away from it for a second to check my phone. When I turned back to the motor, something wasn't right. I couldn't put my finger on it, but something was just different. After a couple seconds, suddenly all the stains, scrapes, dents, and white paint spackle appeared all over it. Then it clicked in my mind that before that instance, it had all disappeared and the motor was just smooth, untarnished metal for a few seconds. That was what was different. I couldn't believe what I just saw happen. It was like in a video game when some top-layer details are slow to load and then they all appear at the same time suddenly. Like someone flicked a switch and everything that was hidden was suddenly shown. It nearly bowled me over. This was no trick of the eye either. This absolutely happened. Snap your fingers. That's how quick every mark on that motor reappeared. I'm at a loss to rationalize it. Just before last summer, my logging company got a contract up north to clear several acres of woods in a few locations in the mountains. To most people, all wooded areas look the same, but when you've been clearing trees for many years, like I have, you start to get pretty good at identifying an area by little signatures and just how the trees are positioned, their relative heights, types of foliage, certain marks on the trunks, certain stumps, etc. The first week we were out there, we cleared a huge area. But before I get to that, I'll give you a little background of exactly how this job worked. The company I work for had 8 guys on the team for this contract, 2 pickups worth, filled with us and our chainsaws and other tools. The company that contracted us had a representative up there that would drive an SUV in front of us to bring us to the various sites where portables for us to sleep in over the next week or so would already be in place. And then after we'd chopped all the trees down in the designated parameters, they'd hire another company to come grab all the fallen trees and turn them into lumber, a process known as hewing, thus leaving the area completely cleared. But that's not too important to the story, it's just how it works. The guy who showed us to the areas to set up in, the one who drove the SUV, was a real humorless person, very matter of fact, saying only what needed to be said for directions and never sparking conversations with anyone about anything. It was just, here's what to do, I'll see you after you're done, and then he'd leave. No scowl, but no smile. We called him the robot. Anyways, back to that first week. The first is always hardest. You have to get acclimated to the work, which is brutal, so you're initially just beat for at least 5 days. To make matters worse, on the first day I dropped my keys at some point. I looked every day and every night for a few hours, but just couldn't find them. I had this big squishy elephant keychain too, so I thought they'd be easy to spot, but I had no luck. Anyways, after 6 days, our job at that location was finished, and I had to go on without them. I was choked. All my keys were gone forever. We were guided down the mountain by the robot guy to another location that took about 3 days to clear after that. Then on to another place further down the mountain that took about a week or so. After that, we were guided back up the mountain for our last location before heading home with a big nice paycheck. When we got there, well, let me put it this way. The words déjà vu couldn't even begin to describe the feeling I got. This place looked exactly like the first area we had cleared that first week. Not similar, exact. The stumps, the layout, the placement of the trees, the paths, the way the branches hung in certain places, the portables, all a dead match. Remember, I have an eye for this. The whole forest may look the same to you, but this is my career. Also, it wasn't just me. We all agreed. My whole crew. I wasn't even the first one to bring it up. But how could this be the same place? These were old-growth trees no younger than 300 years old. We had cut down the trees and cleared that first location. There's no way they could have grown back. After discussing it ad nauseum for at least 20 minutes, it became too much of a head trip. It turned into a heated argument. Anytime one of us would say, this has to be the same place, another one of us would say that that's crazy, and round we went. So eventually we just worked away and did our best to discuss the notion no further, which became harder and harder as the work went on, because each tree we handled seemed like an exact repeat of one we'd already done, every aspect of the process. We were even suggesting little shortcuts every time we'd encounter the seemingly same challenges we'd run into the first time around, and then exchanging uncomfortable looks rather than bringing up a reason to argue all over again. It was frustrating and exciting all at once. Finally, after 6 days, we were done and the area was cleared, either for the first time or second time, whatever you want to believe. But before you make your judgment, explain this. As we were cleaning up, I happened to step on something that squeaked. I brushed away the twigs and branches underfoot, and guess what the hell I found? That's right, the squishy elephant toy on my keychain and the keys along with it that I'd lost on our first day on the mountain. The hairs on my neck went electric. At the same time, the robot man showed up with our paychecks and we followed him down the mountain to the highway and then went back home. Discussion turned into more arguments when I presented the keychain. I was accused of planting the keys there, or that I found them before and didn't say anything. I, of course, knew that that was bullshit, because it was. I found them where I found them and when I found them, and it was a goddamn impossibility for them to have been there, unless that was the same area we'd already cleared when we first arrived. But as the weeks went by, those among us who were skeptical finally came around. It turned out that the company that hired us all out disappeared. We couldn't get them on the phone or find them online. No one else in the industry had ever heard of them. We couldn't get any info on what was happening in the mountains we'd worked on, if anything was going on there. It was as if they just didn't exist. Recently, a guy on our crew came across simulation theory, and it's become the only explanation we can posit for what happened. It's as if we were brought up to that mountain, which was some kind of training program or something, just to be kept busy while something was being adjusted in the main simulation. That's at least the best that we could come up with. I'm not saying it's right, but it's the best we've got. Well, my friends, we've reached the end of another broadcast from the recesses of Nocturnity. I hope you enjoyed what you heard. As always, this episode has been brought to you by cardanapparel.com. The link is in the description. By shopping with cardanapparel.com, you're supporting the continuation of this channel, so help us out by looking good. We have many, many more terrifying, puzzling, and awe-inspiring audio stories for you on the way, and are also working on special video episodes documenting true stories of high strangeness, true crime, the supernatural, the unsolved, and the unexplainable to be released in the future. Don't miss out on any of it by subscribing to Nocturnity right now if you haven't already. This isn't to mention the broadcasts already released on our channel that are there for you to enjoy at any time. This is a new channel and we're just starting to gain a little traction, and we'd love to have you as part of our community from the ground floor. You can also help us out by liking this video, commenting, and sharing it wherever it can be shared. Thank you once again for joining us, and do come back soon and often. Until then, my friends, stay safe.